Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I wanted to honor this important week, not just because it's the last week of 2021, but also because we are leading up to a new moon in Capricorn and the birthday of Bitcoin. So today we are going to talk about what it actually means for the year ahead when we look at the solar return chart of Bitcoin. Because whenever there's a new moon birthday, obviously the new year might be very, very important, not just for everyone, but also for Bitcoin and the whole cryptocurrency community and also development on this planet, especially because, and I have a webinar on that, we have the US PLUTO return coming up, and that is happening in the second house of the US, which has so much to do with finances. And there are a lot of correlations to Bitcoin and the progress charts of Bitcoin that I highlight in that specific webinar. So if you're interested in that, the link to that will be down below with all the information relative to the year ahead, right, financially speaking, and the price predictions for Bitcoin, but also looking back in hindsight and how the energies of the sky and the energy of astrology really have influenced the price fluctuations in Bitcoin and the entire crypto space. So today, though, we want to talk about a solar return of Bitcoin that happens on January 3rd. And I saw some very, very interesting correlations in regards to the US, but also in regards to China, in regards to 2018, and obviously last year and this year we want to look also into. So let me start sharing my screen and go back to the basics, which the basics obviously are the natal chart of Bitcoin. That's the birth chart of Bitcoin. I use this chart right here because it has been basically proven to be very accurate. I know there are many different charts based on a rising sign and the location. I use London and I use 6:15 p.m. And again, the birthday is January 3rd, 2009. So that's the basic natal chart of Bitcoin. And we want to look at the solar return chart. I don't know if anyone else looks at or pays attention even to the solar return chart of Bitcoin, but I love solar returns. And I have videos on why solar returns are so important, especially if it's an eclipse or it's a new moon. It's a very important year because the solar return chart basically gives us a snapshot of the year ahead, right? So based on the energies of the solar return chart, we can get information about how this next solar year will look like for an individual person, but of course also for an energy form that is, for example, Bitcoin. And so I want to actually look back in hindsight on the solar return chart 2021. So the solar return chart of 2021 has some very interesting alignments that basically manifested themselves pretty beautifully. I always say cosmic poetry when I see something like that last year or this year. We're still in this year, like in 2021. First of all, I want to start always with the moon in the solar return chart because I think it's the energy that we feel most strongly on an individual basis. So if you look at your own solar return, you really will feel your moon sign that year. And for Bitcoin, that was a Virgo moon in the second house. And so I think that beautifully describes what has been happening the entire year, where there was a lot of analysis, a lot of data, a lot of more numbers and things and communication about almost a number of communication because of the Mercury rulership that I will go into in a second. But there was a lot of analyzing and looking into and dissecting Bitcoin to the core. A lot of that happening, especially in terms of people also analyzing Bitcoin and really dissecting Bitcoin, being really critical, but then also really, ways to improve the platform, which is also Virgo quality. So there was a lot of improvement, which is the highest expression of Virgo in regards to Bitcoin and the financial stability, second house of Bitcoin as well. And I already kind of mentioned that the rulership of the moon was, so to speak, Mercury. Mercury is the messenger. Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo. And in this chart, very in particular, it also rules the North Node of the last year, right? Because the North Node is still in Gemini. And that North Node in Gemini in the 11th house speaks a lot about the evolution and growth that has happened in the crypto community. the crypto community has grown so much more communication and talk and conversations about Bitcoin, a lot of conferences, meetings in the crypto space where people could learn and educate themselves around crypto. So there was a lot of that happening, also a lot more development in terms of researching and educating, as I already mentioned, and bringing people together, communities, even in the entire crypto space and the blockchain, and more specifically, there are little communities in the communities, like the metaverse community, the gaming community, the DeFi community. There's a lot more community building happening in the blockchain community, or in the blockchain space, in the crypto space, over this entire last year, which is really beautiful. And Mercury as the messenger was placed at 22 degrees of Capricorn last year, which is very significant because that's the exact degree point where we had a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in 2020 that basically started this entire, I don't want to use the word, but the entire restructuring process of the planet, let's just put it like that. And many structures falling, many structures being reconsidered, lots of death and rebirth relative to the patriarchy and the government and all of these things. And obviously with Mercury as the messenger, Mercury also rules the stock market. At that 22 degree point, there was a lot about, is Bitcoin the solution for us? Is that actually the prophet, so to speak, which is also Mercury, that leads us into the future, that leads us into restructuring, actually the things that have been taken away from us, that need to die and be rebuilt. So there was a lot of that happening, and obviously it has a lot to do with also crypto and Bitcoin gaining a lot more power with Pluto and the Pluto influence here. So the talk and the communication around crypto and around Bitcoin definitely changed over the last year, especially because people take it more serious, right? Which is also the Capricorn energy. It's like we take it more serious now. It's not just a hobby. It's not just something that could die off tomorrow. Actually, people see that it's sustainable, that it's actually something that won't go anywhere and that we can maybe rely on. And maybe it's actually time to consider investing in crypto. So a lot more people also investing in crypto, which has a lot to do with also the North Node in Gemini, people being more open-minded to crypto all of a sudden, right? And I think that also speaks to the Chiron and Moon part right here. Chiron's was placed exactly on the Bitcoin Moon, which can be, the wound, so to speak, of Bitcoin, of being rejected all the time for its power and for its innovation. Now people actually don't displace Bitcoin as much anymore, the crypto field anymore, and they actually take it more serious. They give it more power. So I think Bitcoin gained a lot of power last year. And what I also see here with Mercury, no, not Mercury, with Saturn and Jupiter, basically sandwiched in a way between Bitcoin's Jupiter and Bitcoin's Mercury, that as well is a big power and a big future-oriented element that definitely has manifested itself over the course of last year. There was a lot of growth and potential in Bitcoin, and obviously a lot of transformation, which every single day, basically, and that speaks to all of the sixth house energy in general, where Bitcoin really gained power, gained strength, gained not responsibility, gained authority, I want to say, in a lot of people's mind and in a lot of people's field, which again, ultimately, I definitely feel like has a lot to do with that moon in Virgo in the second house as well. And also with Mars and Uranus in the 10th house place for Bitcoin, which has a lot to do with also Mars in the 10th house, a lot of power in Aries. So Bitcoin definitely gained a lot of power, and that connection here to Uranus basically speaks about the Uranus-Saturn conjunction square, that we had over the entire year. That definitely had an impact on Bitcoin in particular, because it was basically hitting Bitcoin's natal North Node all the time. It was really touching that degree point and really pushing Bitcoin towards growth and evolution. And that definitely is something that we especially feel now towards the end of the year. I would say in February and June, July, when we had the first two squares, there was still a lot of volatility. There was still a lot of questioning the entire crypto space. But now, as we end this year, I feel like, and with the final square on December 24th, that people take it a lot more seriously, and Bitcoin kind of freed itself from its standpoint of, oh, that's just a fluke. People just take it a lot more serious, which also speaks about, you know, a lot more even governments and institutions adopting Bitcoin, adopting crypto, definitely has a lot to do with that. And that's even something like a lot of news that we saw towards the end of this year already, around Christmas time, you know, the UAE or China or El Salvador, a lot of governments have basically adopted Bitcoin, which obviously gave it a lot more credibility over the last year as well. And that has a lot to do with all of these Capricorn placements. I mean, Bitcoin has a Capricorn sun by nature, but again, Mercury right there hitting Bitcoin's Lilith actually, and then also with Pluto and with Saturn and Jupiter right on Bitcoin's Jupiter and Mercury, there was just a lot of beautiful, I want to say, and growth bringing aspects in last year's solar return chart. So let's look at this year's solar return chart, or the solar return chart for 2022. I already mentioned that it is a new moon birthday, so it essentially the exact solar return is not exactly on the new moon, because the new moon is always when the sun and the moon are together, and we see the sun is at 13 degrees and the moon and the solar return chart 29 degrees. So it's right after the new moon, but we are still in that new moon energy. And the most important thing is the exact solar return actually has the solar return moon on Bitcoin's, almost to the point, Bitcoin's natal Jupiter. And I do feel like that's a very, very favorable aspect for the entire year. It will make Bitcoin's, I guess, role in this world even more dominant, even more clear. And we can also see that Venus is retrograding, again, very close to that 22 degrees of Capricorn point in the chart, very close to where Mercury was last year. Now Venus is retrograde over this chart, maybe also reconsidering and reflecting on basically what happened last year, right? How was the growth of Bitcoin? How was the evolution of Bitcoin? How was it communicated to the outside world? And how does that relate to the grand context of, again, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in 2020 and everything that happened on the world ever since? And also Venus is basically not stationing, but she's exactly on Bitcoin's Lilith, which brings a lot of rebellious energy into that dynamic as well. And an important factor to think about is that Pluto in the solar return chart is at 26 degrees of Capricorn, which is 1 degree away from the US natal Pluto. So basically very close to the Pluto return of the US. And if we look at the secondary progressions, let me see, where do I have them? For Bitcoin, right in this moment, we see that the secondary progressed sun is 26 degrees of Capricorn. So basically, in the solar return chart of 2022, Pluto is at 26 degrees of Capricorn, which is also the secondary progressed sun for Bitcoin. And again, it's 1 degree apart from the US Pluto. So I do feel that still, I mean, I've said that in my webinar, Bitcoin has so much to do with the US Pluto return in ways that we won't understand now, but we'll understand it moving forward. And I can show you the charts right there. Yeah, that's the US natal chart, where you can see the US Pluto is 27 degrees of Capricorn, basically touching, right, that secondary progressed moon for, that secondary progressed sun for Bitcoin, and also very close to obviously now the moon that is at 29 degree in, that is at 29 degree right there in the solar return chart, which is also the Jupiter. So the Jupiter so close to the US Pluto also amplifies that energy of that Pluto return. And something that I also speak about and dissect even more, that the US sun is 13 degrees of Cancer. So basically exactly opposite the Bitcoin sun. So there's a lot about, through Bitcoin, the US has to face its true soul, right, as a country. And one thing that I also wanted to actually talk about is China's chart in a minute. So I do it now. Let me see. China has its Jupiter at 22 degrees of Capricorn. All of these things are not coincidences. So there's a lot about, still this year has a huge ripple effect, or Bitcoin has a huge impact on how we restructure the world, especially with this Venus retrograde, right? Based on the Saturn-Pluto conjunction that happened in 2020 and everything that rippled out of that and everything that it brought to the surface, basically, especially as we have the nodes shifting into Scorpio and Taurus this year. So a lot more shadows being exposed, a lot more things also in regards to money, to other people's money, to people's resources and money. A lot of that will be happening. And another thing that I wanted to talk about with this, solar return is the fact that obviously Saturn now passed the Bitcoin North Node, which I think is very good because it can be very restrictive and it can be very, not as favorable for Bitcoin. It can have a hard time moving towards that destiny point. But now that Saturn passed, I think Bitcoin also passed the test. And we have one thing that's very amazing, actually, we have a Mercury return for Bitcoin on the birthday, which I think is very beautiful as well, because that's basically hitting home the intention of why Bitcoin was created in the first place. And that Mercury is a very interesting aspect as well, because it's literally conjunct or sandwiched between the ascendant of China and the moon of China. So again, I feel like there will be also a lot, there will be a lot happening with China, but China, because of all of the Capricorn transits that we have right now, even the new moon that we have, it's all in the 12th house. So everything that, like, China's role is a little bit hidden right there. But I think with Jupiter entering Pisces and being in Pisces a lot more, especially because it's the second house, the financial house of China, there will be a lot more coming to the surface relative to Bitcoin, China, and all of these things in 2022. And what else do we have? That's the solar return. If we look at the solar only chart, so not laying it over the birth chart, I think that's also very interesting because it's a Virgo rising chart. So we still work with the Virgo energies, obviously. And I think that it's interesting that there's a lot of fifth house energy, which I think is actually, or speaks about all of the new things and the new applications and the new communities, everything, the innovation basically that takes place and that happens in the crypto space through a lot of creativity and a lot of people creating new things in order to develop the entire system. So I think that will be an ongoing thing, and that will obviously serve the collective, which is the polarity or the integration point in the 11th house. So that's actually interesting. And then also a lot more like foreign people, connecting people, and a lot of education on, and a lot of things happening in that regards. But one thing that is very interesting here is Uranus in the 8th house, so unpredictable things with other people's money. So that can be something that is maybe a little bit, something to pay attention to or to be careful with. So just to make sure that your money and your crypto money is always in, maybe your own wallet, not basically betting on exchanges too much, but really being staying cautious and obviously having your private keys and everything saved everywhere, so you don't lose your money to a third entity or a third party. That's definitely something that I would recommend. Jupiter being in Pisces can be favorable, can be not favorable. It has been a little bit unfavorable before. I think, Jupiter is so close to Bitcoin's Venus, as we see. Yeah, it's basically very, not to Bitcoin's Venus, sorry, to Bitcoin's, it's basically on top of Bitcoin's Mercury. That's the progressions. Where we go. Jupiter is so close to Bitcoin's Mercury can be actually a beautiful, beautiful alignment right there. But yeah, overall, I actually wanted to talk about another thing relative to that 22 degrees of Capricorn placement. Sorry for mixing up all of the dates. I'm looking for the solar return chart. Here we go. That 21 degree right here. The 21 degree last year, it was the 22 degree of Capricorn. So we still play with that energy, and that actually is something that I wanted to touch on very briefly. And when we could look at the progressions, because the progressions are always, I mean, that's a crazy progress chart, but I was looking at the progressions obviously for 2022 or for right now, and realized that in the progressed chart, Mercury is retrograde. And that's something you can even track in your own birth chart, or if you look at progressions, because Bitcoin is not born with a retrograde Mercury, right? So, and because Mercury rules the stock market, it's obviously the messenger. And again, that 2 degree of Aquarius being a very important aspect anyways. So I looked at the progressed Mercury and realized, oh, that progressed Mercury is actually retrograde. So that progressed Mercury is retrograde. And another thing to keep in mind is that in January, we actually have a Mercury retrograde starting in Aquarius, so over Bitcoin's Mercury, moving back into Capricorn, and then moving forward over Bitcoin's Mercury again. So that's something to keep in mind that will be very significant because it rules the stock market, right? So January, February will be very significant months. But another thing that I was paying attention to was Mercury obviously changed direction in Bitcoin's progress chart. So I was wondering, when did that start? When did that happen? And so I tracked it back and realized it happened in April 2018. So in April 2018, Bitcoin's Mercury stationed retrograde, right? And at the same time, and you cannot make that up because it's cosmic poetry, as I always like to say, at the same time, Bitcoin's progressed sun was 22 degrees of Capricorn. 2 years before, we had the Saturn-Pluto conjunction on that degree point. And again, that degree point being very, very significant for everything that's happening in the world. And we had the progressed Mars on Bitcoin's sun, very significant as well. So that made me look at, obviously, what happened in April with the Bitcoin. And there was not too much happening price-wise, like there was not too much. It was one of the higher months, I would say, right? But overall, it was pretty much, there was not a major outbreak or major down or uptrend. But then I was looking into what happened in the stock market in 2018. And where we go, here we go. What happened April 23 with the stock market or with finances? And what we see is trade friction between the US and China, and it continued to escalate. So the reason I think that's significant is because I see this entire battle, so to speak, that we have in the world that has a lot to do with finances. And since, again, China has that 22 degrees of Capricorn with Jupiter in that 12th house, very hidden. And then we have the US PLUTO return next year. I don't think all of these things are coincidences. So I do see that next year there will be a lot more friction between China, the US, also related to Bitcoin and also related to the intention and reason why Bitcoin was created in the first place. And whenever I say Bitcoin, Bitcoin is the foundation of the entire blockchain, right? And so it obviously has an impact on the entire development of the blockchain and what happens there, and the belief and the trust and the faith in that entire, I guess, branch of finances. And because the US PLUTO return will basically have a big impact on finances, and that's already in February, I do see that there's a correlation. There will be a lot of interesting things moving forward. Did I actually touch on the solar return moon? I don't think I did. I mean, yeah, the solar return moon obviously is in Capricorn. On that definitely, and in the 6th house, which gives it a work of flavor, again for the entire year, but it's more so analyzing, improving, and building new structures at the very master degree of Capricorn, which I think can be very favorable for Bitcoin. So overall, also with that new moon energy, I do see that Bitcoin will have a new energy and new development moving forward. Does that mean that there will be crazy increase in prices? Not necessarily. I don't think that we have these crazy fluctuations too much. I feel like, yeah, maybe, I mean, it will definitely rally and it will definitely increase. I'm not going to say that it won't, but I feel overall it's matured now and it will be more stable and less of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose all of my money tomorrow. It's definitely a lot more stable. And so I feel like there is a big maturity aspect in Bitcoin also because it passed that Saturn North-Node conjunction here. So yeah, overall, I feel like it will be a very significant year for Bitcoin, especially when we look at what will be happening in the US and what will be happening in China. So I'm excited for it to see, and I just wanted to share the astrology of it. Obviously, if you would like to have more insights on the correlation between the US natal chart, right? And sorry, yeah, the US natal chart and the Bitcoin natal chart, and also the progressions, because I go into the progressions and the solar return, I go into all of that in the webinar that I have about the correlation between the US PLUTO return and Bitcoin. It's the link down below, so you can get access to it. It's very affordable, and it gives you a heads up about finances in 2022 with the nodes shifting into Taurus. I think that's the best thing for us to do, to focus on being sovereign and having not all eggs in one basket when it comes to finances. So if you would like a heads up about crypto, then definitely check that out. With all of that being said, I also share more information on my Instagram, Magic Kathy Official, and on my podcast, The Magic Kathy Show. And I also teach people in financial astrology and overall in astrology and human design. So if you would like to have more information on that, definitely let me know, or reach out to me via email or via Instagram. Also, if you would like to learn astrology or human design from me. So with all of that being said, I hope you have a beautiful transition into 2022, celebrate that new moon in Capricorn and also Bitcoin's birthday, and we will speak to each other very, very soon.